It's relatively warm today, almost up to thawing. So I'm going to work out here a little. But I thought I'd do a video about something somebody had asked me in the comments one time, a while back, what I thought about German tanks being given to Ukraine. You know, they've got, see, they aren't coming from Germany. They would be coming from Poland. They're the Leopard 2 tanks. The problem is that Poland has to get permission from Germany to send them. And Germany is kind of hemming and hawing. It's very much like the situation with them MiGs that time, where they couldn't get it actually straightened out as to, you know, if they could send them or not. Because a lot of times, like say, I'm sure the Poles now, if these give them Leopards, they want like Germany or the US to replace them with either newer Leopard tanks or the Abrams tanks. You know, and the UK is talking about sending like a dozen of their Challenger tanks, or Challenger 2. But the idea, it isn't really, you know, it's a small amount of tanks. It really wouldn't make any difference. But there's a purpose to this, what they're trying to do, what the Ukrainians are trying to do. They haven't been able to convince the West to give them more modern arms. And they figure, you know, okay, like these Challengers, it would be a problem. They take a special ammunition that would have to be brought in. You know, it would be, logistically, it'd be a problem. Plus the training would be a problem, because the modern heavy tanks takes a whole lot more training. So what the UK would end up doing is they would undoubtedly have to have volunteers to run these tanks. Well, that's quite an escalation. And when you're bringing NATO people in, the same if the Poles brought those Leopards in, the Poles would have to come with them. And there again, big escalation. But what Ukraine really wants, you know, they want to get the West into the habit of sending them top-notch stuff. Like today, I even heard they had put it out that the UK was going to send them a handful of Apache attack helicopters out of England. Well, they shut that down in a hurry because we wouldn't allow that to happen. In the first place, there again, they can't run them. It would have to be NATO people that would be running them. You know, big escalation. But that's what they're trying to do. I mean, that's the purpose behind the whole thing. Because, like, say, normally with tanks, with modern tanks, say if you got 30 tanks, 10 of them are always in for repair. They're very high maintenance, especially the Abrams is notoriously high maintenance. So you'd have to send, you know, people in there, because there's no way the Ukrainians are going to be able to run them. You know, it's funny, you know, like they always talk about training them. I heard from, it was an outfit in the States here that is some sort of non-profit that is set up to train Ukrainian recruits, they say. According to them, like 70% of the people that Ukraine is kind of just picking up off the street and running to the front, 70% of them have never held up a gun before. They have no idea what they're doing. They're just there to die. they can be of no real use. They just cannon fodder. But the idea that they're going to, like, say, even them Apaches, which are notoriously finicky to fly, and they think they're going to just jump in them and go, that isn't going to happen. It would have to be, the whole, like I said, the idea is to drag NATO kicking and screaming into this. They've resisted so far, but this UK, if they send those challengers over, that's a foot in the door. But like say Germany, they don't really want to give those Leopards to Ukraine or permit the Poles to give their Leopards to Ukraine, because that drags them into this. And the problem is that their manufacturing, their heavy industry has been so affected by this gas problem that they can't make more. I mean, we keep making promises. Oh yeah, they're going to give them this, and they're going to give them that. Maybe 2 years, 3 years down the road. Well, it isn't going to go on that long. They'll be pecking away, but that's never going to happen. So we're kind of stalling for time, and seeing if we can't stretch this out until it comes to a natural end without us getting too involved in it. Partly because, I haven't really talked about Ukraine for a while because that's just a meat grinder now. I mean, they're just running it out. Either they're going to let it run until it just everybody is dead, or they're going to have to greatly escalate it. And I don't think that's going to happen, because at the same time, we've got stuff going on in Serbia. We're Serbia used to be part of Yugoslavia. We broke up, there again it was NATO, but we broke up Yugoslavia. Now there's that Kosovo, which has got a hell of a big NATO base. Well, they're bringing more troops into there because they're starting to get a squabble going with the Serbs again. So that's going to fly. I'm sure something's going to happen there. It's funny because one of the justifications that Russia had for going in to Ukraine was because we had done almost the identical thing by going into Serbia, bombing the crap out of that. If you look at the two instances, they've got a lot of parallels there, but that's getting fired up again. It was a horrible, messy deal, confusing operation in the first time, and I'm sure if they're going to try to fold these two operations and keep the Ukrainian one going and fire up the Serbian thing again, that's going to get really ugly. But they're paying a lot of attention to that now, is to what's going on in Kosovo, because there again, very much like in Ukraine, there was a treaty when the bombing finally ended that the Serbs had a right to have so much military in Kosovo to protect the Serbs that live there. And they just ignoring that treaty now. They're not allowing them in there. The Albanians, which is what's in Kosovo, which is funny, it was so confusing when this whole thing was going on before. Because usually, we're we're tormenting Muslims all the time. Well, here, we were defending the Muslims and bombing the hell out of the Christians. It was just a weird situation. The whole thing didn't make much sense. But there's a funny thing. I at one time, this was like maybe 2 years ago, I saw this documentary on the breaking up of Kosovo, or of Yugoslavia, why that happened in the first place, why all these little countries are there. They would just say, "Oh, it was a civil war." Well, they aren't spontaneous civil wars. There's some that we always gin up, and that's what happened there. But the reasoning behind it was fascinating. That this guy was saying it had to do with when Tito was running Yugoslavia. It's a big country, but he was pretty chummy with us at the time, and it turned out that he had acquired some secret Nazi space travel documents, and oh God, we're really fond of all the old Nazi stuff. I mean, that a lot of our space stuff is based on that. So here was some that nobody else had. So we made a deal on them. And the feeling was that we kind of got burned because the stuff that was in there really wasn't, it was pretty fanciful sort of stuff. So we felt like we got burned on that. So in response, we said, we are going to tear this country apart. And that's what we did. We tore Yugoslavia apart. And then, of course, later, we all did this whole Serbian bombing thing where we just tore the hell out of them. It was funny because part of the deal, after these space documents, it's funny how we deal with that stuff. But part of that was a trade agreement where we started importing stuff from Yugoslavia, including the Yugo cars. So I haven't seen a Yugo in the wild for a long time. They didn't last very long. But there was actually a dealership in town at the time that was handling them. And they were the cheapest car you could buy in this country, was a Yugo. So they actually sold a few of them, but like I said, I don't think they lasted very long. But when we went in and started bombing Serbia, one of the first things that was hit was the Zastava plant. Zastava makes all kinds of weapons, but they were making the Yugos. And they blew up that plant. And I guess there was shrapnel of Yugos all over the country. But we're warming up to go at them again. So I think we're going to kind of stall on this whole Ukrainian thing. I hope we don't, because it's just a trap, really. I mean, the idea of them getting, because what they really want, like I say, is Abrams tanks. The Leopards, okay, they can live with the Leopards. The Challengers, they don't really care about, and like I say, there'll be all kinds of problems with them. The Leopards they can kind of live with, but I don't think Germany, like I said, they can't make more. They can't, they don't want to get involved in that. But the Ukrainians really want those Abrams ones because then they could drag us into this mess wholeheartedly because that's what would happen. There's no way they couldn't run them. They couldn't maintain them. It would be us doing it. So there's resistance there. But like I say, even, the Ukrainians have a tendency to use these cluster munitions. Well, they had some laying around from before. They're about out of them. And the funny thing is, they don't use them on the battlefield. They shoot them into civilian areas. That's what they use them for. Those nasty little pedal mines and stuff. But they know that we have a lot of them in storage in this country. We have a lot of cluster munitions that, there's a lot of countries that they're banned, but we would never sign on to that ban. We do that all the time with chemical munitions and stuff. Everybody else wants to ban them, but we think we better hang on to them. Well, Ukrainians know that we've been hanging on to these cluster munitions and they want them bad. But they can't just slip them out. This has to be, we have a ban on exporting that stuff. And these EU countries that it is banned in, I don't think they would look kindly on us turning over these cluster munitions to Ukraine. And it would take an act of Congress to do it, because like I said, the export is banned. And I don't think that they could get that through. Because like I said, they don't really use them on a battlefield. They use them in civilian areas. They target cities with them all the time. So, it does a lot of damage, but it isn't winning the war. It's just hardening people against them. But it's a shame to see, kids getting arms and legs blown off. I mean, that's a hell of a way to fight a war. When in theory, you're going in to try to protect that civilian population, and instead you're blowing them up. So I can see they'll probably end up with some challengers. They maybe get a dozen Leopard tanks, but I don't think we're going to fall for that Abrams ploy, and that's what they're really after. But God, I hope we have more sense than that, because like I said, they couldn't possibly run these things. But they want heavy tanks. They think they need heavy tanks, but I don't think tanks is the way to go. I think the time of tanks is past. There's too much stuff set up to take tanks out, specifically designed to do that. And, one of our big things there is this is like a demonstration area for products that we want to sell to other countries. Well, you go and send some Abrams in there and get them blown all to shit. That ain't going to fly very well for the sales department of the military-industrial complex. Because there are times where these Abrams have been used and took a severe beating. And they're just notoriously hard to keep running in the first place. And expensive to build, expensive to run. It's incredible how much fuel that they burn, but I don't think they're going to go for it. But it's Ukraine. It's trying to drag us into this, get us hooked in here, and I think instead we're going to start playing with the Serbs a little more. But there's a problem there. If you remember, it might be, well, maybe not quite a year ago, the Serbs had several plane loads of anti-aircraft equipment flown in from China. They took such a beating in that bombing before. I think they're getting prepared to defend themselves this time. I don't think they're going to, we love to do that. We like to go into countries that really don't have modern equipment. And we bring in this stuff and, we can just raise all kinds of hell. But if a country has, like in Ukraine where we're up, against Russia, which has modern equipment, that's a whole other story. We don't shine so well there. We'd sooner be chasing people out in the desert and blow the hell out of them. This is a different thing. But I think something's going to turn loose in Serbia. They aren't going to put up with this nonsense again. And I have heard that there are elements of the Wagner Group, which is that Russian private army that has been doing a hell of a lot of work in Ukraine, that some of them are already in Serbia So I think they're prepared for that. They're looking it over. But like the president of Serbia, he said the country at the moment is just a den of spies. There are all these Western spooks over there poking around. So something's going to go down. We'll see what happens. But I don't think these tanks that people are worried about that keeps getting turned up in the news. I'm not concerned about a couple of handfuls of tanks. But if we get suckered into this and send them Abrams over there, then there will be hell to pay, because that escalation will be just all out of proportion. The Russians won't stand for that. Because we always say, "Oh, it's not our fight. We're just helping." No, we're not. But then it's our fight. But denied as much as we've got boots on the ground as it is now. But like when I say about like the Abrams, that this, they like to use stuff for a selling opportunity, for like advertising and testing. That's what this whole HIMARS thing was. Because after they blew the hell out of them, but they did some damage with them when they were there. So they were able to use this as propaganda, as a sales pitch to other countries, because then other countries were ordering these HIMARS. And at least we still have, we don't have much industry in this country, but we do have the weapons industry that we have. So I suppose they'll be making them, but that'll be further down the road. Oh, and I think there was some of them Leopard tanks out of Lithuania. I think they were going to volunteer a few. If I remember right, I think I heard, because Lithuania is always trying to stir something up, and I think they're trying to stir that up too. But I don't think there's a great hesitation on Germany's part to allow the Poles to send them in. So I don't think that's, it's possible that they might work it out, but that opens the door for a lot of other stuff. I guess if the UK sends them challengers, Germany will probably allow Poland to send in those Leopards, but if the whole thing is there, they would want the Poles would want either the new Leopards, which Germany is already short of, and like I said, they really can't build them. It takes forever to get anything built, or they would demand the Abrams. And I don't think that's going to happen. I hope not. That would be a foolish move. But normally there is always a, because when the Poles got those Leopards from Germany, they got them at a bargain price, but with the stipulation that they couldn't resell them without their permission. It's like, I think it was Germany that was sending over some armor of some sort, but the problem was that the only ammunition had to come out of Switzerland, and the Swiss refused to sell it to provide ammunition for an ongoing conflict. So that didn't pan out. And I don't know about these Challenger tanks. Like I say, that is an ammunition that is specific to them. How much does the UK have of that? But I don't think they would last long enough, the tanks. The Russians would make a point of taking them out pretty damn quick. So they really, they wouldn't make an actual difference, except for the fact of what they're trying to accomplish by dragging the West further into this. That's the scary part. But the UK is involved in that whole Kosovo thing too. That was one of these things again where the UN wouldn't go for it. But the US and the UK got together. But there's a lot of pressure on Serbia and Hungary to toe the line with the EU. And the EU is now linked very closely with NATO. And they completely ignore what the UN wants, or that's nothing to them. They do whatever they want to do. Like coalition of the willing nonsense. And that's what they're going to try to pull here. I've said for quite some time that the NATO is actually just like the military version or the military wing of the EU. But no, I'm not worried about the tanks. But the Serbian thing, that I'm a little concerned about. It was a boondoggle the first time. It's not going to be any better this time. But they're going to do something there. Because they have been moving troops and equipment, building up that NATO base in Kosovo. Which, it's one of these things again, too, where they can't work it under UN because a lot of countries don't even recognize Kosovo as a legitimate country, though the EU wants to bring them in. But they're actually a province, some semi-autonomous province of Serbia. That was the deal. But that's why the Serbs were supposed to have some rights there. And they're trying to take away those rights. The whole squawk started with this license plate thing, where because there's Serbs that live there in the northern part of Kosovo, and they were getting a lot of static because their plates were registered in Serbia. But Kosovo wants to claim its own thing. And we're backing up that claim. But the UN doesn't back that claim up. Yeah, well, maybe start the fire in here and I can maybe melt some snow off the roof. Get a little landslide going. Or it makes the dog bark and the horse run.